evening. I'd like to call the evening session, the March 20th meeting of the Johnston County Board of Commissioners to order. Welcome those who are here this evening to be with us, and also welcome those who are watching from home or wherever on our YouTube live stream. As is customary, we will open with a prayer and a pledge. I've asked Commissioner Godwin to lead us in the prayer and Commissioner Stevens to lead us in the pledge. So if you would, please stand.
Let's pray. Father God, we're thankful for the blessings of this day. We're thankful for the blessings of springtime and for the blessings of being in Johnston County. We invoke your blessing on this meeting as we come together to be about the county's business. We thank you, Lord, for the people of Johnston County and those that make Johnston County a great place to be. Forgive us of our sins. Bless our meeting. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
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 I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. I would like to take the opportunity to recognize a special guest, former Representative, Senator, and current NCDOT board member at large, Mr. Leo Daughtry. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here with Peg, and she's going to give you a real good presentation. I'm her assistant.
That didn't cost extra, did it? All right, just making sure. All right, the first item on the agenda is approval or discussion of the agenda. Do I hear any items that we need to adjust or approval of the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, make a motion we approve the agenda as presented.
I second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor of approval of the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Agenda is approved. Next up, we have consent agenda items for approval. We have 4 items this meeting. We have approval of our minutes from February 6th, both the 10 and the 6 o'clock meeting, and also our February 20th meeting at 6 o'clock. We have a municipal funding agreement with Pine Level. We also have a funding agreement with 4 Oaks. And we also have a couple of budget revisions for the airport and for our finance department. So do any of those items need to be removed for additional discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the consent agenda be approved as presented.
Second. All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Consent agenda items are approved. Next up, we have public comments. I'm just going to survey. Is anybody here for a public comment? I know we have a proclamation, but is anyone here for public comment before I read all the stuff that I don't need to read necessarily? So, all right, we will move on from, and any emails? Okay, no emails. So now we will move on to item number 4, which is a proclamation for Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, the Johnston County Alumni Chapter. So I'll ask Vice Chairman Harris to read that, but is there anyone want to come forward and speak to us before we get to the reading of the proclamation?
Hi, my name is Talia Virgin. I'm the current president of Johnston County Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta. Johnston County Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta was started on April 27, 2003 by 12 women from Johnston County. We'd like to acknowledge the hard work that we've done in Johnston County and the fact that this is our county and we love it. We have contributed to the county because we believe in Johnston County and the importance of Johnston County and the work that we do. So we'd like to thank you. We look forward to celebrating our 20-year anniversary this April, and we welcome all of you to the anniversary.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, it's my honor to read the proclamation commemorating 20 years of outstanding service, the Johnston County Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Whereas Johnston County Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated received its charter in April 27th, 2003 to serve the entire geographical area of Johnston County, North Carolina. Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, founded on January 13, 1913, is an organization of college-educated women committed to public service with a purpose to aid and support through established programs in local communities throughout the world. And whereas Johnston County Alumni Chapter has worked diligently to serve the community with innovative programs and projects that encompass all aspects of Delta Sigma Theta's strategic priorities. Community partnerships include, but are not limited to, the North Carolina Med Assist, providing free over-the-counter medications to residents, financial literacy workshops to foster first-time homeownership, the 5K walk run aimed at raising awareness of pressing social issues that impact our community, Launch JOCO and Young Entrepreneurs, both of which promote small business development and grassroots community growth. And whereas the dedicated members of Johnston County Alumni Chapter give generously of their time and financial resources to support higher educational opportunities for young African American youth in Johnston County. To date, the County Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority has given over $100,000 in college scholarships to students in Johnston County high schools. Most recently, the sorority established the Minnie Hunter Scholarship to fund a fund to support adult women returning to college. And whereas the Johnston County Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated was the first Black Greek organization for women to be established in Johnston County. The organization continues to have an impact on the local community. This year, the sorority is supporting House of Hope, a Christian therapeutic organization serving hurting and vulnerable girls ages 12 to 17 through fundraising and community support. And whereas the Johnston County Board of Commissioners commemorates the 20-year anniversary of the Johnston County Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, celebrated on April 23, 2023 at the Johnston County Agricultural Center. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Johnston County Board of Commissioners does hereby proclaim April 23, 2023 as Johnston County Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated Day throughout Johnston County, and congratulations on 20 years of outstanding service. Proclaim this 20th day of March 2023. And Mr. Chairman, I'll enter that in the form of a motion to approve.
I second the motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor of adopting the proclamation, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Proclamation is adopted. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Since you are all here and ready, do you want to get a picture?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, okay. Come on.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I've been tall as you got.
Yeah, somebody can fill in right here. Yeah. We're
That's
good.
not perfect.
Yeah.
Good job. All right, I'm gonna take a couple. All right, everybody look at the camera and smile. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Thank y'all.
All right.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank y'all very much. Thank you for your service.
And thank y'all for all you do.
Oh. Yeah, you
sure?
sure? Yeah, it looks like he's gonna send one to her, so. yeah.
Absolutely.
There'll be a cost in that.
We gotta make some money. We don't have no money in the budget.
Don't you say that out loud.
That's for the apparel. For the apparel.
You want it?
I will.
You want money?
All right, next up on the agenda is presentation from Public Utilities on Phase 2 of the Water and Sewer Regionalization Feasibility Evaluation. So I think Mr. J.D. Solomon is here to present that to us tonight.
Commissioners, J.D. Solomon with J.D. Solomon, Inc. If you remember, I did the first phase of the regionalization study on behalf of the county as the project manager. We retained Black & Beach to do that first assessment. This is for Phase 2 that's before you tonight. Phase 1, as a reminder, was about physical infrastructure, about the interconnectivities and the capacities and some of the environmental issues that may present problems. Phase 2, we get into the money, and we have part of that's about organization, but it's really about organization, about people, how they're staffed, and how they're interconnected with other jurisdictions that may relieve pressure on their need for capacity and whatnot. Again, we have 13 jurisdictions. It's inside and outside the county, as we did before. Primarily looking at the jurisdictions here, and then also the relationships they have with others. It's a 6-month duration. Black and Beach has said that's what they're comfortable with, and I think it's aggressive. But that would be probably coming back to you guys sometime right after Labor Day with some draft information, and we can decide if we need to run that through Jennifer or any of the towns before we bring it to a meeting. But that's kind of our schedule. And same approach as before. We'll be working close with the manager and the utilities director, but again, trying to stay impartial and work among all the communities as well as Johnston County Public Utilities. So I'll be brief. I'll stand here and ask any questions for you guys.
All right, any questions for Mr. Solomon? All right, if no questions, I hear a motion to approve moving forward.
I make a motion, we move forward with the Phase 2 regionalization study.
I second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. I will say, at our strategic planning session we talked about our board priorities, and I'm going to try to mention those priorities and how they relate to the items on there. So I would say this last item and the one coming up relate to infrastructure, financial stewardship, and land use, which is 3 of the 6 of our priorities. So with that, I will move on to comprehensive land use plan. Preston, you're going to kick that one off. And just say we do have an update, and if you would present to us on that at this time.
Yes, sir. Included in your agenda packet, you did receive an update presentation with regard to some modifications or proposed modifications and options for modification to the land use plan. And this was all generated from the comments that were received by the board from each individual on the board. This time I'd like to bring Ms. Meg Nealon, Mr. Ben Hitchings, who lead the project team, and to come forward and lead this presentation as well.
Thank you, sir.
All right, good evening.
Good evening. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. As you know, I'm Meg Nealon with Nealon Planning, and with me this evening is Ben Hitchings with Green Heron Planning. And we are before you this evening to continue a conversation about some of the information that's in the plan, and we understand that all of you have had a chance to look a bit more at the details of the plan and have brought forward some specifics that we have captured as the topics. Let me see if this is advancing. It's the PDF. We could just tell you to advance the slide, okay. So this first just sums up the topics that generally a lot of the feedback that we have received fall into these categories. And so we'd like to spend a little bit of time talking a bit about the kinds of adjustments that we might suggest as options for the land use and conservation plan map, as well as some edits to the text of the recommendations in the latter section of the presentation, of the draft plan. So those topics being agriculture, mixed use, area plans, and utilities. Of course, a lot of these topics are interrelated, but it seemed to us that some of the feedback really fell into these categories. So we will talk a bit about each of these in terms of the maps and the recommendations. So if you want to go to the next slide. So you're familiar with, and you can go ahead and advance to the next one after that. So you're familiar with the future land use and conservation map that is in the draft plan. And that shows that distribution or assignment of the place types across the map throughout the Johnston County jurisdiction, excluding the municipalities. And those range, of course, from the very low density agricultural and conservation place types all the way up through some more of the centers that we would expect to see a mix of uses. And so in the next slide, you'll see that page out of the document that explains each of those place type categories. All of that should be fairly familiar to you, and as we have said before, it's a way of looking at different areas throughout the county, not just in terms of land use, but also in terms of the scale of development, the amount of open space, circulation, and other features like that that distinguish one from another. Next slide. So again, that is the distribution, but as we talked in recent months with this board, some of the details were pointed out. We talked about the suitability that informed the creation of this land use map. So we'll dig in a little bit with the examples we brought forward in December, those being highlighted on this map. And so if we want to go to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about suitability. So you're seeing two maps side by side. And if you look at them closely, one is suitability on the left for residential development, and the one on the right is suitability for agriculture. So we take a number of factors into consideration. And one of the things that you will note as we step through the next few slides is that some of these areas, as you would expect, are equally suitable for agriculture, and they're also suitable for residential. That's also true if you look at the full set of suitability maps for commercial and industrial. You see that overlap in the suitability. And what we try to do is look at these factors from the standpoint of what makes the most sense given the kinds of activities that are already happening on the ground and what the potential is going forward. So the types of things that we're seeing in agricultural suitability are represented with these factors. Being in a voluntary ag district, for example, is one of those things. Already having an operation on site that is viable is also a factor, and then participation in present use value program is also one of those factors. The next slide shows that residential suitability, and again, you see some overlap where the most suitability also shows up in the agricultural areas. So we know that residential is drawn to areas where there are schools, where there's infrastructure, sometimes even where there's already residential activity happening. It's locating where the access to jobs and services makes sense. So we see them gravitating to these areas. So a lot of what you're seeing in the suitability maps mimics how site selectors are also looking at these properties. So again, this is the suitability along with a lot of other information like the market conditions and the public input come into play when we're talking about that future land use vision. So what the community is telling us blended with where the potential is what's reflected in that map. So if you want to go to the next slide, we're back to the future land use and conservation map that is in, okay, good. That is, you're doing a great job, though. That is in the draft plan. So we picked a few places that we showed you in December that are presently shown on the map as agricultural areas and open space, and we looked at the possibility of those shifting to residential. The reason that we looked at those is because we thought those are places where you're really in the path of growth. You will or already have infrastructure generally in that area, so in terms of serving those areas, it gets a little closer to what's possible. And so as we stepped through some of these, I'm going to take you through a continuum of map options here that show this building of ideas just to be able to demonstrate that closer look at the details of this map. So we take the Marks Creek area. That's one that we had designated as an agricultural area. We look at the suitability. Of course, it meets all of those factors, but it also can be suitable for low-density residential because it's close to high residential suitability, or it's in that area, it's close to the urbanizing edge of the Wake County line, and it's adjacent to Clayton's ETJ. So we also looked at this area around Selma and Pine Level, designated for rural living in an agricultural area. And as we look at the suitability there, you can see those factors for the agricultural area. The possibility of shifting those to the rural living category has to do with, again, their location generally in the urbanizing areas, but also there's some existing and improved small-scale subdivisions in there. Just that relative distance from municipalities where services can be delivered is also makes it a possible change away from agriculture. So we did that in the Pine Level area also, and so we show those shifts in the land use map to look like that. So we've highlighted those areas so you can see where that change occurs. The gray box on the left generally explains what I was just referencing in the larger zoom-in maps. We put an option 3 in here because we thought, well, if that applies in those areas, that was a test case last time. We looked at some other areas where that's also a possibility. So what you see highlighted on this map is a few other areas where that type of change for the reasons given could also be possible. So what you saw in option 2 is on this map, but then we've added a few more that also could be considered in this case. And then finally, we go to option 4. You'll notice on option 3, we still have quite a bit of land devoted to the agricultural place type. And we know there's been some discussion around how much and what if showing the agricultural areas on this map really means. So again, it all ties back to the suitability of the land and the activities that are already taking place and the potential for different activities going forward. Here in option 3, we have removed the agricultural area and converted that to rural living for your consideration. The connection between the possibility of agricultural designation on a land use and conservation map and what that means for zoning was a topic of discussion last year. So we wanted to bring that forward and show that on a map to see this is what that looks like if from a land use map standpoint, the distinction here is we're removing that as a distinct category from that map as option 4. We would retain some of the recommendations about how to support or promote agricultural uses in the county, but as a distinct land use type, that would not be an option 4. Some of these changes in the maps that you see presented here would have an effect on the language in the recommendations. And so Mr. Hitchings is going to take you through some of the details of what that would look like in these edits to be considered.
Thanks so much, Ms. Nealon. Pleasure to be with y'all this evening. And so again, we understood that feedback that you provided through the chair and to the planning director fell into those 4 categories. So as Ms. Nealon described, we also have to update and tweak some of the policy language to reflect the comments and suggestions and direction that y'all provided. So the first one is land use policy number 6, supporting the continuation of viable agriculture. One of the comments we heard was really the importance of recognizing that agriculture is an industry. And so you'll notice the language in red is what we've added. We've tried to be, when revising this language, we've tried to be surgical and put your comments in the appropriate places to be reflected in the policies. As Ms. Nealon mentioned, y'all have a continuum that we're proposing on the mapping side with 4 different options, the existing map plus 3 other options. If y'all choose option 4, that would have a little bit of implication, and so we just have to make some minor revisions to remove the word agriculture from a couple of the policies, or a couple of places really actually in Land Use Policy 6. You'll see the first slide, and then again another spot would have to change if you end up choosing that as a mapping option. Moving on to mixed use, one of the points of feedback we heard was an interest not only in allowing mixed use, but really trying to promote it in appropriate places. So there are a couple of places where we've changed the language from a more neutral language to something where where the policy actively speaks to trying to promote and support a mixed use style of development. So we've got that in Land Use Policy 2 as it relates to the concentration of commercial development and activity nodes, a couple of places there, and third place as well in Land Use Policy 2. And then one more time, actually, well now, so those were the places where we changed things like allow or support to really promote. Another area of feedback that y'all gave us was an appreciation for the value of the area plans, like Ms. Nealon had sketched for McGee's Crossroads and for the Corinth Holders area. And so here, in a similar way, instead of, we're proposing for your consideration, changing the language, consider preparing more area plans to just an outright statement that that's a useful thing to do, prepare area plans. So again, these are kind of surgical comments. Now, the next category, utilities, gets a little more involved, and we know y'all have been having discussions as part of your annual retreat. This is obviously an ongoing topic that y'all have engaged with for quite some time. We know that the county has limited financial resources and that you really are focused on trying to spend the public funds that you have wisely to support appropriate growth in the county. And so we have a suggestion here in response to feedback that y'all had given us for creating a system to try and guide the expenditure of public money as it relates to utilities. Of course, you already have an existing adopted water and sewer utility policy. So this is something that would be, we think would be something you would consider integrating into that policy, especially as you start to get more additional information from some of the additional utility studies that you're engaged in currently, as we heard from in the previous agenda item. And other analysis. So this is a concept. It would need to be studied further and appropriately configured in order to be used effectively in the county. And what it is basically the establishment of what we might call priority investment tiers. Okay, if we've got a set amount of public funds, where should we make infrastructure investments sooner, and where should we make it later? And are there places that are just, that we're not really considering with the public use of funds? So that's one part. And then the second part is reimbursing developers. We know so often a developer will build a project, they might have to oversize those utility lines initially, and yet they're often only using a portion of that capacity. And so as additional developers tap into those service lines, there's an opportunity in your existing policy to reimburse the first developer who made that larger investment. And here, what we're proposing is that there be some areas, like the higher tiers, where you would make public investment and you'd reimburse developers sooner and to a larger degree. And then as you got further, as you got to the areas that the suitability analysis indicates are less favorable for development, you might reduce or stop the public investment, and it might take longer to reimburse developers for their private investment. And then finally, with the third tier, you'd allow private investment if someone could extend lines to an area, that could be fine. And then it might be a very long time before they have an opportunity to recoup some of that oversized cost from future developers. So there are a couple of proposed revisions in that regard. And we also have a map as well.
Excuse me, Ben, what's
Yes.
STLT, VLT?
Short-term and long-term.
Okay.
We should have spelled that out.
And
I
very
apologize.
long-term. Okay.
Short-term, long-term, very long-term. So that's what we have on that slide. Again, now this is a map that is derived, again, from that suitability analysis that Ms. Neeland referenced, that is trying to sort of channel county concerns and also what site selectors might look for as they try and locate appropriate development in the right places in the county. And you'll see three different shades, well, blue, the darkest being what would be the highest tier, where those areas might be good candidates for public investment and for reimbursing private investment where a developer oversizes a line, reimbursing them more fully and sooner. And then as you move out down through the tiers, again, trying to match that original suitability analysis, there would be still opportunity for private investment if it made sense, but there'd be less public involvement
Ben,
in that work. Yes, sir.
could I, this is just a suggestion. I think,
Sure. Yeah.
I think this utility map here would have to be modified based on whether you take the first maps you gave us, option 2, option 3, and option 4 would influence this map.
So you could do that. You could choose to have the utility map match whichever option of the future land use map y'all have done. In this example,
I'm not, first of all, I'm not trying to get into discussing this or where it goes. I just want to raise this as an issue
okay.
for you, that I think this utility map would need to be coalesced with whichever option of the maps we choose at first.
And so that is absolutely something y'all could discuss as a board. And again, right now it's based on the suitability analysis, but what we think you could absolutely, you're going to need a more detailed process to think through those issues. So it may not even be something you want to decide right now and maybe could follow up. What we envision is that there would be an implementation project in your portfolio of implementation projects once you approve the plan, where one of the activities is taking a closer look at this map, seeing what makes sense, seeing how to configure it appropriately,
Sure.
and then how to develop supporting policies that also work in partnership with the map. So good point to take a look at that. All right. Any other questions or comments on this map before we move on? All right. Then, again, we just have a few tweaks where we want to include a reference. If y'all direct us to include this system of priority investment tiers, there would just be a few other places where we'd want to reference it in some of the policies. So our remaining policies speak to this. Again, it's the most detailed language on this that we're proposing was that second utility slide where it actually talked about the 3 tiers. And so all of this is supporting language for that. And then there's one final place as we work through the different utility policies where we think it would also make sense to reference it. So that is what we're proposing for the policy, the verbiage that you have in the plan. And with that, I'll turn it back to Ms. Neeland.
Thank you, Ben. Yep. And finally, a suggestion for an implementation matrix. So all that is looking at ways to make this plan more user-friendly. In that section of the document with all the recommendations, it's fairly lengthy. We don't take the word comprehensive lightly when we're doing land use plan and take into consideration all the interrelated factors that matter when you're thinking about future development in the county and conservation. So the matrix can be developed to include details that outline a lot of those recommendations and start to put some definition around timeframes, who the lead agency might be, what goals they're achieving, and so on. So this is something we see as being an addition to the plan. If you see that as something that makes the plan easier to use, it would be in the appendix. This just gives you a little sampling of what that might look like. We took GM5, Growth Management 5, as an example, and rewriting local regulations to fit and implement this plan. There may be some near-term action steps as those you see listed in the second column. Timeframes, and this is just an example, so we're not suggesting that by adopting the plan you're adopting these target dates here, but having those targets out there, you can measure your progress on implementation of the plan and see how well you're fitting those targets. It's always something that can be revisited annually because circumstances arise and you may want to decide that there's another priority project or a different target date because of those circumstances. The lead agency in this case is the planning department. And then, of course, when you look at the set of goals throughout the plan, so many of the things that you can accomplish with your local regulations should really hit on all of the goals or most of them, if not all. So that's a suggestion for an addition to the appendix. So, and that wraps up our presentation to go through some of the details that we see as options for changes to respond to some of the feedback we think we've heard and based on our understanding, and ways to make this plan more usable so all of your decision making gets a lot easier going forward. So with that, I'll ask if anybody has any questions. We'd love to provide any information if there's a detail in your feedback that we have missed that we would need to respond to.
Any questions, comments?
I'll just comment, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, we've got to finalize this map, but then we've got to use it for this plan.
Yeah, and I would just say thank you for wading through all the comments and presenting something that's very concise. I know we still, and I'll speak for myself, after last week with 2 days at the retreat, I've glanced through this and your presentation, and I would take a chance to take a look at it, but it's something we need to dig into a little deeper. But also would ask, can we get like a red line version of the whole document so we can look at to see what the changes were in the actual document, so we can, well, at least I'll request that. I don't know if anybody else wants that.
I was thinking that, doesn't this superimpose over that? I mean, there's red line changes in here.
They are, I mean, it's a fairly short list, so yes, we
Okay.
can take that and put it right into the document.
Good.
So you can see where they show up.
That would be good.
Okay.
And those are suggestions. There may be some details that are similar to the ones that Mr. Hitchings presented that we may need to find, but if those are starting to look like the kinds of clarifications that you're interested in, we will make sure we've caught all of those.
Okay.
And I think it's Commissioner Smith said, we can look at those 4 options we have, and then kind of like what Mr. Kitching said is, I don't know that for us to decide and then go through and adjust the utility map prior to approval or do that as one of the goals afterward, is make that, once we finish, we revise that map to match whatever we select, unless that's an easy task. I don't know if that's an easy task or not, but it doesn't seem like an easy task to me, so.
I might add one thing about that is we need to present that as a concept with the recommendations for further study, because there are things like septic failure or issues with pump stations and things like that that would come into play as well.
Meg, I don't want to let the rabbit out of the bag and get into a long discussion. I just had, first off, I thought y'all did a great job. Let me just say that. There was just one question that I had, which it looked like to me, and I'm sure I probably am missing something, that I thought was a conflict. And that's LU4 and LU5. In LU4, you say support more intense residential development and a broader range of housing types. And then you go to LU5 and say, discourage intense residential development in the rural, unincorporated areas of the county. And so I'm just trying to, and I understand, and you know, we talked about in other places have more dense development, which you picked up on. So I just thought that was a conflict that I didn't understand. I felt like I understood everything else that y'all put down, and I was pretty much in agreement with all that. But these two I thought were in conflict.
Okay. Just quick answer to that is the context. And so both of those recommendations tie back to their related place types. And so we're looking for the intensification of residential in the right places, because when it comes to service delivery, transportation solutions, things like that, those concentrations of the population will make more sense for the resources that are devoted to the infrastructure and facilities associated with that. The LU5 is related to where you're reducing the pressure for development. In other words, if you're supporting it in one location, it means that other areas would have less of that, so there isn't that burden on the county to deliver an equal set of services and infrastructure across the entire landscape. So if you look at the context, it should make more sense.
Right, any other comments, questions? Thank you very much. We have plenty to dig into between now and our April meeting, so
Okay, thank you.
thank you very much.
Really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Say goodbye.
All right.
Hey, Leo. How you doing? What do you think about that baseball team, man?
Good to see you, sir. Thank you.
Good to see you, sir.
Hold on here.
Good to see you, Les.
Thank you, Leo.
Are you the bodyguard, Leo?
I've got it.
He's the driver.
All right, next up we have manager reports and comments. All right, and we'll turn it over to the board for reports and comments, and we'll start here and work our way around.
Well, we heard Mr. Solomon tell us that hopefully in 6 months we'll have an idea of where we need to start to get some things started, some talks with these cities. But I, for one, am eager to get things moving, and I want to see it happen. I want us to do whatever it takes, and I think once again, I'll repeat what I said at the retreat. One of our biggest things is that we don't have control over is transportation, the roads in the county, and we don't always. You got certain thoroughfares that we already require 70-foot setbacks on a primary, and I think on secondary 50-foot. Those we setting them back. When are we going to use them? When are we going to start having some meaningful conversation with DOT to see what we can do to help them or what they can do to help us to get some feeder streets out in the county so we don't have congestion when we do have this growth, so that we can get people to their destinations quicker and they're not backlogs every morning and every afternoon. So that's two things that I just wanted to bring up again.
Let me weigh in on that and compare North Carolina and South Carolina, because they have two different systems to support roads. And it's a relationship between the gas tax and the property tax. And we just need to know that's what it is. I'm not trying to say what's right or wrong. I'm just trying to say what is. The reason everyone goes to South Carolina if they can to buy gas is because the gas tax in South Carolina is substantially cheaper than the gas tax in North Carolina. The reason for that is in South Carolina, counties have responsibility for certain roads. And those counties have an increased property tax to take care of their roads And so there's less of a gas tax in South Carolina. In North Carolina, theoretically, except for the Powell bill to help cities, all of the money for roads comes from the gas tax. And that's why our gas tax is higher, and it's a state responsibility. And theoretically, that makes our property tax lower because the county doesn't have road responsibility. So I just throw that out as to what the system is. I didn't design the system. I just had to learn to deal with it, and that's our system. I think it's when the county starts, in addition to the property tax, starts taking on road responsibility, like South Carolina did. Counties take on road responsibility. We'll be putting double burdens on our citizens. So I'm not trying to say anything other than try to get understanding and how the facts work.
And what I was talking about is joint, just support for the NCDOT in certain cases. If we've got a thoroughfare that's down their list, what can we do to help them move it up in priority? Especially if we've got a lot of development trending in that area.
So, and again, just another thing, whatever the pot of gas tax money is, 500 million, 700 million, whatever it is, it gets equally divided into 13 districts. So there are 13 districts. That's what highway districts are. There are 13 districts, and they all get the exact same amount of money. And so then it gets to priority as to what you can get your district, what roads you can get approved with your pot of money in your district. And I've always sort of laughed when I was in the General Assembly. The whole General Assembly, Republicans are arguing with Democrats. They're fighting back and forth. Sort of on the last day, it's when they decide the road stuff, and everybody in your district, doesn't matter whether they're Republican or whether they're Democrats, they get together to bring money home to their district. I can remember John Carr and I, we would debate, but when we started talking about getting money out of that pot, we were on the same page, Wayne County and Johnston County. So I just throw that out for understanding how the system works.
And I just had one more thing to that. As we're looking at our transportation plan, we'll have some opportunities to make that impact in our participation in Campo or
Maybe we'll be an
RPO or
maybe
whatever
we'll be an
PO we're in. Yeah,
That's right.
we'll be able to do that and help with some of the prioritization on those. And I think our increased participation in those will probably help out in the future. So, Commissioner Godwin.
I just want to commend you and the staff for a very well-executed retreat last week. I thought the staff from the association did an outstanding job of facilitating it. Had some good discussion, and they did a good job.
I would 100% agree with that. All I did was sit in there and let them do their work and let y'all do your work. So, Vice Chairman Harris.
Yes, sir. I'll just extend Commissioner Godwin's appreciation to not only what he included, but also our staff here locally, our county attorney and our manager and our clerk and deputy clerk, and there's so just countless hours of work went into preparing, and I call it taking the show on the road to go down there, and also our IT department folks did a phenomenal job as well. So just very appreciative, and our finance director, all those people that went down and made it a very productive 2 days. So thank you all for your hard work and dedication.
Commissioner Braswell.
I have no comment.
They ditto.
Ditto.
Yeah, I was going to make this comment at the retreat, but the chairman gave such a good wrap-up, I thought it would be rude to speak after he spoke, so I'm going to do it now. I just want to tell you what a pleasure it is for me to be a commissioner with the other 6 of you. As the staff from Raleigh told us over and over again that every county can't do what we did those 2 days. There's 7 different worldviews sitting at that table. And there are some people on this board who have strong feelings and strong, that they want certain things to happen certain ways. But I think we do a great job of showing each other courtesy, working together. We fight hard, but we still friends and work together and try to keep the goal that Johnston County is making the best Johnston County is what we're all trying to do. And I just want to say what a pleasure it is to work with each one of you.
All right, thank you for that.
Thank you.
And I was going to bring up the strategic planning retreat, but I will pass on now to say thank everyone involved in it for making it what it was. I will say last year we kind of did a bunch of work, and I think this year that paid off with the work we were able to accomplish. So thank you to all that everybody else has mentioned. The other thing I did want to remind the group, and this is our second reminder, and I'm throwing myself in this category, is we have a sewer allocation policy that's been on our plate for a little bit that we need to get back. I'm not going to say anything about Ms. Farmer looking at it and nodding her head, yes, you need to look at it. For her and Ms. Lesser, I didn't see Ms. Lesser nodding her head, but we owe them getting that back to them after the work they put into that. So just add that to your list of things to review. I know we had the land use plan update, but review that as well. So with that, I think we have a need for a closed session. I'll look for a motion to go into
Okay.
closed
I
session.
move the board go into a closed session for the purpose of consulting with an attorney employed by the board in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege pursuant to NCGS 143-318-11A3 and to establish or instruct staff concerning the negotiations of the price and terms of a contract concerning the acquisition of real property pursuant to NCGS 143-318-11A5.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? I will add for the public that we do not anticipate to take any action once we come back into open session. So any other discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion to go into closed session, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We will go into closed session after a short break to clear the room.
Thank y'all again for coming.